So you want to read books that have demure characters. They are very thoughtful, very stylish. Basically, I compiled a selection of books that I have already read and that I think kind of fits in some way the prompt, the TikTok trend for demure characters. If you're not on TikTok and you haven't seen this trend, there was basically this woman where she was getting ready for work and she started talking about, look at how I go for work. I'm very demure, very mindful, something like that. I actually just found out about the trend from other people. My feed was basically people saying they were very demure and a bunch of dolphins thinking about how they just
want to be a part of your symphony. You hold me tight and not let go.
with questionable messages in front of it. But I still don't have books for that will fit the symphony trend. Maybe I should do that. But for demure, I think I got a selection. Demure, by the way, according to the dictionary, it means reserved, modest, and shy, typically used of a woman or, yes, kind of modest. And some synonyms include modest, unassuming, meek, mild, reserved, retiring, quiet, shy, bashful, diffident, reticent, timid, coy. In terms of books, I went more for kind of a more quiet, a more shy main character. But let's stop with the yapping and let me start talking about the books on my list. So let me open here the list. I opened a different tab on Ocean. In terms of order of recommendations, we will start by classics, then we'll have a sci-fi, we'll have a psychological thriller, we have some literary fiction, and we will finish with romance because we have quite a few of romances to talk about. So in terms of romances, we are going to start with two of my favorite books ever, and they are also very popular books. Maybe you have already read them, or if you have watched other videos of mine, you will probably have already seen me gushing about these books because they are two of my favorite evers. The first one is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and in this book we follow two sisters, Jane and Elizabeth, and the main character really is Elizabeth, and they come from this upper middle class family in countryside England. This book takes place in the late 1700s, and basically a very wealthy man moves near their house, moves to their little town, and he starts throwing these balls, and their mother, whose only focus is to marry off her daughters, she kind of wants them to they go to the balls and she just wants her daughters to marry rich, preferably rich. And in one of those balls we meet Mr. Darcy, who is this very stoic, grumpy, very wealthy man who he and our girl Liz, they get off on the wrong footing. She overhears Darcy saying some very nasty stuff about her. But this is a romance novel, and I don't know, can I spoil this book? It's just so popular and not new at all. But Mr. Darcy, he's very much a demure kind of character, but he's nothing but demure and very mindful when it comes to our Elizabeth. And this is the OG enemies to lovers story. This is one of my favorite enemies to lovers stories. This book, it's just so good. It is a classic, but it is one of those classics where it's just so easy to read. There aren't difficult words, there aren't difficult prose, and the characters just feel like one of the best romance novels ever. Even my mother likes this book, and she doesn't read fiction, so I think this is the highest compliment I can give to a book. So Pride and Prejudice, we follow Mr. Darcy, a very demure, very mindful man. Next we have a book with a very demure female main character, and it is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. One of the things that I love about this book is that you can read it as if it was a romance novel, you can read it as if it was a coming-of-age novel, you can read it as if it was a thriller, an adventure story. This book is just like 100 books in one, and basically in Jane Eyre we follow Jane. She's this very demure girl. Her parents died when she was a little girl, so she went to live with this aunt who wasn't that great to her, and this aunt sends her to live in a charity boarding school, and Jane grows up in this very demure, very conservative environment, but she's very smart. She's a brilliant young girl, and when she's around 17 she goes search for a job outside of this boarding school, and she ends up going to work at this big house in countryside England also, and very far away from the boarding school where she comes from, where she's basically going to work as a governess to this little girl called Adele. And Adele, her guardian is Mr. Rochester, this very wealthy, broody, mysterious man. He's not a man of many words, and you just need to read this book to understand how magical it is. It took me a while to pick this book. I initially started reading this book when I was 16, and then I ended up giving up halfway through it. And then at the end of last year, I decided to pick it up again, and I'm mad at myself for not having read it sooner, because truly it's such a beautiful book with such beautiful writing and some of my favorite quotes ever. I rarely highlight any quotes, but here is one of my favorite quotes ever in this book. "I tell you I must go," I retorted. "Rise to something like passion. Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and who as much heart. And if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. I am not talking to you, not through the medium of custom, conventionalities, nor even a mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet, equal as we are. This book's just so beautiful. The writing is beautiful. The only thing about it is that there are some passages in French, and I don't know about necessarily other versions of this book. I think other versions will have translated these passages. My edition, which is this Rhodes edition, I'm not sure if they even sell it because I got it over 10 years ago, but it isn't translated to English. It is in original French. Luckily I do understand French and I can read it in French, so I understood what they were saying. But maybe have a look at an edition that have this part translated to French. But even if you don't find it, honestly, you don't lose much by not reading those little phrases in French, and you should just read it. I know it is a very long book. My edition is over 600 pages long, but it is 100% worth it. This is one of my favorite classics ever and one of my favorite books ever, and it's Chef's Kiss and Jane. She's very demure. The next book is one that it is kind of weird to put it in a demure list, but I think it fits the vibe and it will fit the taste buds of people that prefer a speculative fiction or want something that is kind of weird, kind of horror, like light horror, because I don't read hardcore horror. I do like literary horror though. And this book is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is the first book in the Southern Reach series, and basically these books, they take place in this alternate reality where there's this weird area called Area X that showed up somewhere around Florida, and when you cross this border you end up in this ominous space that seems very Earth-like, but things seem to decay very fast, and everyone that goes to that area, they never come back. They always disappear, and the few people that come back, they come back kind of weird. They don't act like themselves. They end up getting very sick and die soon after they go back to Earth. And by Earth, I mean regular Florida. So far, there are 3 books from this series that were released, and apparently Jeff and Demure decided to publish a 4th book in the series, which I don't know why. I thought the 3rd book, which I thought would be the last one, was a good way to wrap it up. But basically, in the 1st book, Annihilation, we follow a biologist that she decides to go to Area X because her husband, he went to Area X, and then when he went back to her, he came back from this expedition, he wasn't acting like himself, and she wants to find out what happened to her actual husband. So she enrolls to go on a new expedition to Area X and decides to explore the area herself. The reason why I put this book in demure is because our biologist, who is unnamed by the way, she's very much shy, reserved. She doesn't really mingle that much with other people. She's very demure. And if you like weird fiction or sci-fi in general and still haven't read this book, I highly recommend. It is one of my favorite sci-fi series. And the 1st book, I remember not really enjoying it as much as I liked the other 2, but most people really love this one, and I do recommend reading Annihilation. Now, another one that it isn't sci-fi, but it is more like literary horror-y, psychological thriller. It is Lullaby by Leila Slimani. Depending on the translation, I say this I think every time I talk about this book, because in English I found it was translated to 2 different names. It is either Lullaby or The Perfect Nanny. In the original French, it is called Chanson douce. And basically, in this book, you have this perfect family, this housewife who decides to go back to work, and her husband who is a music producer, and they have these 2 little kids. And because she decided to go back to work, they are searching for a nanny to take care of their kids while they are working. And then they find this woman who, she just seems perfect. The kids get along really well with her. She seems to take care really well of the kids. She takes care even of the house, even though it is not her job description. She's supposed to be there to take care of the kids. And our nanny, she's very demure. She is very reserved. You don't know much about her life. And this book, by the way, it is a psychological thriller, but it is very much a character study. We start finding out stuff about this nanny as we go along the book. But the whole premise of this book is that this woman that it is so perfect, that the kids love so much, something happens with her and the kids. Something really bad happens with them, and this book is basically a character study of this woman and the reader finding out what happened. Now let's go to a literary fiction, which is The New Me by Hale Butler. This is a book that it follows Millie. She is working as a temporary receptionist at this high-end design company, and the book basically follows Millie, and then we have sprinkles of the POVs of her boss, the receptionist supervisor, Karen, who isn't the biggest fan of Millie, and some other people around Millie. But the whole premise of the book is that we have our main character who is in this not very well-paying job, and overall she's always in between not very well-paying job. She's also suffering with depression, which she doesn't vocalize that she has depression until relatively good chunk of the book. And the reason why I decided to put the new me in this demure book recommendation is because the thing about Millie is that internally she's kind of very chaotic, but externally she's very much a passive person. She's very passive throughout most of the book. I think this is a literary fiction that it is perfect for people that really enjoyed kind of no plot, just vibes kind of books and character studies and blend of this drama. Personally, this was a book that I really liked the shell of, but the inside, like the seasoning of the book wasn't there for me, but I would still recommend because I think Millie, she's very demure. Now let's move on to kind of romance, but a literary fiction kind of romance, and it is one I love so much. It is Evidence of the Affair by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this is a short story. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited, but basically in the Evidence of the Affair, we have two main characters. The woman, she just found out that her husband is cheating on her, so she decides to send a letter to his lover's spouse. And then our main character and the lover's spouse, they start sending each other letters and they start to befriend each other. And I don't want to give that much spoilers about this book, but it's kind of like the cheating trope done really well. This book also has awesome vibes. I think it takes place in the 70s, so amazing vibes, amazing writing, incredible, interesting characters, and it is a short book, but a mighty book. And the reason why I decided to put this book in the demure book recommendation, by the way, is because they exchange very mindful, very demure letters. So much so that their spouses doesn't even realize that they know they are cheating with each other. Now let's move on to romance. The first one is right here near me. So for most of them, the guy, he's kind of more of the shy, quiet type. We have two by the same author. But let me start telling what books I decided to put in this list. The first one is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. In this one we follow Vanessa and Aiden. He's a very famous American football player, but he's Canadian and he just lost the timestamp for him to renovate his working visa. And then we have Vanessa, who is Aiden's assistant, and right at the beginning of the book, she quits because he's very quiet, and she overhears him not defending her after someone says things that really offended her. But then a few weeks after she quits, Aiden shows up at her door and asks her to marry him because he needs a green card and she's one of the few people he tolerates, and in exchange for her committing fraud with him, he will pay off her student loan and buy her a house. In classic Mariana Zapata fashion, this book is a chunky one. It is a very much slow burn as well. Very, very slow burn. Like, I think they brush hands at 90%, they don't get together until like 99% through the book. So if you're one of those people that love the yearning in a romance novel, The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, it's for you, but also any Mariana Zapata book will probably be for you because Mariana Zapata is the queen of slow burn. She manages to, I don't know what she puts in her plots because it's like nothing happens, but you can't stop reading it. So if you're into a book that it is also more vibes, not very much plot, Mariana Zapata might be for you. This book might be for you. And the reason why I put this book on this demure list is because Aiden, he's very quiet, he's very demure, he's very mindful, but good luck trying to figure out what's going on in his head. I think that a lot of people have theories about it on TikTok, like what might be going on through his head, but good luck because this man is quiet. Now let's move on to another Mariana Zapata book, and it is Coty. This one we follow Sal and Coty. She's a football player, a regular football player. If you're from the United States, you might call it soccer, but the rest of the world will call it football. So I will also call it football. But basically, Sal, when she was a little kid, she watched a very young, very early on in his career, Coty playing football on her TV, and she basically fell in love with him and the way he plays, and she decided to become a football player because of him. Now, many years later, Saul is a professional football player, and Cody, he becomes the assistant coach for the team she plays for in Texas. At first, they don't start off in the best of terms, but then they become friends and really good friends. And as the plot progresses, something happens. Cody realizes that he does have a chance with her, and if you want a book where the love interest basically becomes a cat and he wants to spend all his time with her, she walks to her living room and the guy is there, or she's going to drive to her parents' house and the guy's like, yeah, I'll go with you, can I go with you, sort of situation. If you want an amazing jealousy scene, Cody might be for you. Against Marian Zapata. This book is very much slow burn. It's less slow burn than The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. They get together a little bit earlier on, and it's a little bit more spicy as well. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, it's like the spice is on 99% mark of the book, and you don't need to read it if you don't like it. But in Cody, it's at the end of the book, there are some spicy scenes, but you can also easily skip them if you don't like reading it. And the reason why basically I decided to put Cody in the demure is because he's very demure. He's very quiet. He's a little bit easier to understand what he might be thinking than Aiden in The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, because you just need to see how he acts, the things he says. It is a little bit easier to understand what is going on Cody's brain. The next book on my list is The Right Move by Liston Ford. This is the second book in the Windy City series, which I actually have a whole reading vlog for that series on the channel, so I'll link it up somewhere up here and also on the description box. But basically the Windy City series, it is an interconnected standalone romance novels. You don't need to read the books in order, or if you don't want to read a book, just you don't need to read it and you can understand the stories. And if you tried reading Mile High and you didn't enjoy it, I still recommend reading The Right Move, because this book is just miles better than Mile High. But basically, in The Right Move, we follow Indy and Ryan. Ryan, he's this very famous NBA star, and he's very demure, he's very quiet, he's a stereotypical introvert. He's also an acts of service king, and the king of quiet love, and we love Ryan in his household. And Indy, she's his sister's best friend, and Indy, she recently got out of a very long, kind of toxic relationship. She doesn't really have a place to live at the moment, so Stevie, Ryan's sister, she decides to convince them to live together, for Indy to stay in Ryan's spare bedroom. And what first starts as a not great first impression, it becomes a budding friendship, and then they start to fake date. But also it is a romance novel, so at one point they'll stop fake dating and start real dating. And this book is just so good. Ryan Shea is one of the best book boyfriends I have ever read, and he's a demure king. Next on my list we have The Long Game by Elena Armas. This is technically the first book I think in a series, but it is also one of those interconnected standalone series, so you don't really need to read all the books in the series. But basically in The Long Game you follow Cameron and Adeline. Cameron is a retired star coal tender. He's very demure. He decided to move to a tiny town somewhere in the United States because he doesn't like the spotlight, and also he's very demure in the sense that he likes wearing very practical clothes he buys at the camping store, and in general he just prefers living a more demure lifestyle at a tiny town in the countryside with his 2 cats and a mysterious chicken. And then we have Adeline. She is I think the PR. I think she works in PR at a regular football team. But basically Adeline, she gets involved in a scandal and she's sent to live in this small town, the same small town Cameron is in, and she needs to run this little league 6-year-old girls football team. And at the beginning of the book, Adeline and Cameron, they don't really get along, but then they start working together, they start understanding each other more, and then they fall in love, and it's a romance novel. So if you want a demure small town romance, this might be a good option. Next we have a book talk favorite. Also, one of my favorite books ever. I know there are some people that really love it, but I also see online a lot of people that don't really enjoy it and find this book kind of cringy. I personally enjoy the cringe in this book, and it is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. In this book, we follow Adam and Olive. Olive, she is a 26-year-old PhD student, and we start the book with the scene, but basically she wants her best friend to go out with her former boyfriend because they clearly like each other, but they don't want to go out with each other and date each other because he used to date her. So she ends up telling her friend she's going on a date. She gets caught on a lie, and in order to cover up, she kisses the first man she sees on the hallway. And this person ends up being Adam, who ends up being this young superstar PhD professor who is known for being not the nicest, very quiet. Basically, this is Raylo fanfiction. And yeah, he's in general, he's very socially awkward, very mindful, very demure. And this is in classic Ali Hazelwood's feminist novels, and actually in classic Ali Hazelwood fashion, this is a really funny book. Maybe it is cheesy, it is cringy. Personally, I really enjoyed it, and I just find it's a good palate cleanser. It's just a good book if you want to binge something, if you just want to have fun. And now let's move on to the last book on my list, and that's when I don't remember how I found it. I think I found it all suggested for me on my Kindle front page, and it is called Just the Way You Are by Beth Moran. And this is kind of a romance, slow burn romance, but I would say it is more of a coming of age story where we follow Olivia, and Olivia, she has this overbearing, toxic mother who gaslights her, and basically she doesn't let her daughter have a life of her own. And on her 29th birthday, Olivia decides it's time to put a stop to that, so she buys a house without telling her mother, and she moves without giving her mother her address. And in that house, she starts basically having a coming of age situation. She meets her neighbors, she befriends her neighbors, she meets the hot ranger from the market nearby her house. We have like this friendship storyline, we have a growing up storyline, being the abandoned storyline, we have a romance storyline. It's just a really cute book, and again, I think it's a good palate cleanser book. So yes, that's it for all my recommendations for demure books. If you have any recommendations for books you think can fit this trend of very demure, very mindful, please let me know in the comment section. And yes, in general, this is it for this video. And if you like this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel so you can get new bookish and fashion related videos on your subscription box. And I hope to see you very, very soon. Bye!